OK. Le temps est venu de vous présenter notre dernier intervenant. Alors, Michael Adams est un éminent commentateur des questions d'ordre social et de l'évolution de la société en Amérique du Nord. Président fondateur du groupe de sociétés de conseil en recherche et communication Environics, Michael Adams est l'auteur de 5 livres dont le succès de librairie Fire and Ice, The United States, Canada and the Myth of Converging Values, qui lui a valu le prix du meilleur livre sur les politiques publiques canadiennes en 2003. Dans son dernier livre, Staying Alive, How Canadian Baby Boomers Will Work, Play and Find Meaning in the Second Half of Their Life or Their Adult Life, Michael Adams se penche sur les changements apportés dans la société canadienne par la génération d'après-guerre et ceux qui restent encore à venir. Dans ses chapitres sur la famille, la santé, la technologie, la politique, la retraite et la mort, M. Adams démontre que plus de 9 millions de Canadiens nés entre 1946 et 1965 sont tout sauf uniformes. Les statistiques d'Environics sur les questions d'ordre social révèlent l'existence de 4 types de valeurs sociales qui influencent les années à venir à leur façon. La compréhension de la diversité de cette génération importante du point de vue du nombre et de son influence est une nécessité pour les mercaticiens, les gestionnaires de ressources humaines et les citoyens engagés. En 2006, M. Adams a fondé l'Institut Environics, spécialisé dans la recherche par sondage, qui est un organisme à but non lucratif et qui a pour mandat de parrainer les recherches pertinentes et originales portant sur l'opinion publique, les comportements et les valeurs sociales de toutes les questions liées aux politiques publiques et à l'évolution de la société. L'Institut Environics cherche à recueillir les avis de ceux que l'on n'entend généralement pas et en posant des questions inhabituelles. À ce jour, les projets de l'Institut ont inclus le premier grand sondage jamais réalisé auprès des musulmans canadiens, ainsi que l'étude des Autochtones en milieu urbain, qui visait à mettre en lumière les expériences, les valeurs, les identités et les aspirations des Inuits, des Métis et des peuples des Premières Nations vivant dans les villes canadiennes.
Michael Adams is a noted commentator on social values and social change in North America. The founding president of the Environics Group of Research and Communications Consulting Companies, Michael has written 5 books, including the best-selling Fire and Ice, The United States, Canada and the Myth of Converging Values, which won the Donner Prize for the best book on Canadian public policy in 2003. In his most recent book, Staying Alive, How Canadian Baby Boomers Will Work, Play and Find Meaning in the Second Half of Their Adult Lives, Michael reflects on the changes baby boomers have brought about in Canadian society and the changes that are yet to come. In chapters on family, health, technology, politics, retirement, meaning and death, Adams shows that the over 9 million Canadians born between 1946 and 1965 are anything but uniform. Environics social values data reveal 4 distinct value tribes that will negotiate the years to come in their own ways. Understanding the diversity of this large and influential generation is a must for marketers, human resources managers, policymakers, and engaged citizens. In 2006, Michael founded the Environics Institute for Survey Research, a non-profit entity whose mission is to sponsor relevant and original public opinion, attitude, and social values research related to the issues of public policy and social change. The Environics Institute seeks to survey those not usually heard from, using questions not usually asked. To date, the Institute's projects have included the first ever major survey of Canadian Muslims, as well as an ambitious urban Aboriginal People study that sought to illuminate the experiences, values, identities, and aspirations of Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people living in Canadian cities. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Michael Adams.
Mesdames et messieurs, accueillons M. Michael Adams.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Well, that was a terrible introduction. You didn't mention my book, Sex in the Snow. Bruce, come on. Bruce Lawson, the Lawson family, thank you very much for inviting me here. Terrible, you know, when kids say terrible, they mean great. Everything is the opposite, so that's what I meant. So no slashing of wrists or anything. But yeah, the first book, Sex in the Snow. And I invited all my old girlfriends to the launch party. And Valerie came up to me and said, Michael, give me a break. You're interesting, but you are not that interesting. She was right. So Bruce said, okay, we want you to tell the gang everything you know. And I said, great, 5 minutes and then Q&A. Because, you know, it's complicated, or it's there's differences between Canada and the U.S., or, you know, tracking over time. We're becoming more liberal and tolerant, or whatever. But what I've done today is looked at the Environics, well, Stats Canada, which I think is still in business. We'll see after the next budget. What do we need numbers for when we know the answer? So anyway, Stats Canada numbers. We're going to look a little at demography change. We'll look a little at some public opinion, what do Canadians think about themselves, their country, and others. And then I've got to get into my social values work, of course. And so it is a bit of an overview. I know you've had 2.5 days of people talking at you, so I'll try to, you know, hope it's interesting for you. And if I can leave a little time, we'll do Q&A. If not, and you've written something down, you have to ask me. I have an email address, and I love getting back to people and interacting with them and so on. And if you want to tell me what research I should be doing and not the crazy stuff I'm talking about today, tell me. I have an institute. You know, I want to talk to people we don't normally hear from. And golly, we started with the Muslims, the new other here, right? Urban Aboriginal people. I have a project in Toronto, the Black Experience. What is to be a black person in our country? So I take on all the, you know, all the difficult ones. Or Aboriginal. I mean, we have of course, this big meeting here. I mean, it's time after 4 centuries, we did something about that conversation. Multiculturalism, I don't know. I mean, we've done so well with that. Not with everybody, but boy, we're doing really well on that score as well. We even have a conservative prime minister who celebrates multiculturalism, the only conservative in the Western world that defends that idea. So, you know, a lot of stuff's going well. Other stuff could go better. But I want to look at things that we don't talk about. I've just got this inspiration over the last few months. I should be doing something on mental health. This is the taboo is lifting. Boy, just think of your family, grandparents, parents, siblings, kids. We're all touched by it, right? And it was a taboo. We didn't talk about it, right? And now we're talking about it. And my daughter at Queen's, I mean, she knew a young man who took his life. It was terrible. She has another young friend in first year, anorexia. Well, it wasn't hidden. We talk about it, and we have to evolve in that area as well. So don't ever worry, kids, that there isn't going to be an issue in Canada. We're going to make this, you know, the unlikely utopia has got a lot of issues, and it can be even better. And then after we make Canada perfect, we'll go down, you know, south and help Obama with his country. By the way, I could elect the Republicans. I just figured out. I did a poll. I've got to start. I will start this presentation, Bruce. Sorry. We did a poll and found out that 70% of Canadians would vote for Obama and about 10% would vote for the Republican candidate. So if I were the Republican, I'd get up and say, do you realize that 70% of Canadians would vote for Obama? And that would defeat him. Because they'd all say, well, why doesn't he go up there and run there? We don't want him here. So I'll try to keep that under wraps till after the November election. All right, so enough of me rambling here, and let's talk about, you know, what defines us. Demographics is who we are, you know, when we're born, you know, gender and all those basically ascribed statuses, our racial, ethnic, religious, all of that kind of stuff. What do we think, and what are our values? And those are things that I've spent 40 years studying and writing books about. All right, this one, by the way, you're all welcome to this. This is in the public domain, so if you need to download it or you need it to present to your colleagues somewhere, steal this. It's like literature. It's all yours. I stole it from other people, so you can steal it from me. And you know, take parts of it or whatever, and you can interpret it any way you want. You may even have a correct interpretation. Who knows? So this shows population growth from 2010 to 20 over the next 10 years, and you can see which, where are the population segments that are growing. And essentially, it's my generation of boomers. I was born in 1946. And we go for another 20 years, the baby boom. And now we're just celebrating our 65th birthday. We're in denial. I got a ticket from the TTC. I said, I want a senior's ticket. And he didn't ask for my ID. Jesus. I look that bad. I was depressed. I still haven't got over it. You can tell. I'm not getting old. I'm a boomer. I'm getting better. I'm like a bottle of Bordeaux. So, Jesus. Anyway, here we are. We are going to get old, most of us, and that's what the future looks like. It's the growing segment. If you look at, how we've, population growth in Canada, and then if you project ahead, if we didn't have any immigration, we would be declining, right? Fertility rates go down. We find this with immigrants. Again, every time I see this stuff, I go off on a segue. Immigrants come to our country no matter where they come from. And even if you think it's religious patriarchy they bring, let me tell you, the women stop having babies. And very quickly, they are at the norm of 2.1 or even less. Some groups are actually lower than the Canadian population that's been here generations or more. So again, put that in perspective. What a woman does with her body is a real indicator of social change, whether it's abroad or whether it's here in Canada. So we then have declining population, but if we have immigration, we're going to be above, growth. There will be growth, but we need those 250,000 people a year to have population growth. And I'll show you later, it's something it's an overwhelming consensus that we should have robust immigration. And of course, we have got rid of racist immigration. People come from around the world and are doing pretty well in our country. We now have 20% foreign born in Canada. It's the highest number since 1931. You'd say, I don't remember back, and you probably don't remember 1931. But after the First World War, we brought in a lot of immigrants from Central and Eastern Europe to fill the vast expanse of the Canadian West, right? And that's the big numbers that you see in the 20s and in the teens and 20s. And then, of course, the Great Depression. Nobody wanted to come to Canada. There was nothing going on here anyway. And then after the war, more and more people started to come. And now we're up to about, 250,000 people. We have 6 million immigrants, 20% foreign born. It's probably a little higher than now. This is 06 census. Australia's at 22, but I think we've actually now have eclipsed Australia. U.S. is an immigrant country, but it's only, just over half the proportion that we have in Canada. Ours come from around the world. Theirs come from of very few places, Mexico, obviously, Latin America, and so on. It's a narrower range than our wide range of people. As you can see here, look at this before, just look at the first bar and the last bar here. Before 1961, Europe, 90%. Now look, Europe, 16%. And we got Asia, Middle East, Asia, Caribbean, United States. Actually, we asked people, we did a survey recently for the Institute for Canadian Citizenship as our partner and so on, and we asked people about citizenship and how proud they were about the country they came from. And the Americans, of course, among all the people, were among the least proud to have come from the country they came from. Of course, these are draft dodgers and deserters and people who are looking at Republicans. And I guess, I don't know. Anyway, you can see, around the world, this is where they come from. Now, you'll probably be surprised, UK. Well, that's after the Second World War. I mean, they came in droves in the late 40s and in the 50s. So it's still the largest source country of the 6 million immigrants. But then China, India, of course, India and Pakistan, Philippines, and so on. So look at this. 15 countries have given us 100,000 or more. That's a city. Right? So there are 15 cities of 100,000 or more, but these are from specific countries around the world. 82 countries have given Canada 10,000 people or more, and 150 countries 1,000 or more. If those 1,000 people from those 150 countries have a pretty good time here, in other words, if they get jobs more or less in line with the qualifications they bring, if their kids go to school, and blow our socks off with all those, in terms of doing well in school. And they do. The program of international student assessment shows that first and second generation immigrants actually outscore people on literacy, numeracy, and problem solving than people who've been here 3 generations or more. They may not have been Protestants, but they sure brought the Protestant ethic, I'll tell you that. And if these people are successful, they're going to bring other people, right, whether it's family reunification or whether it's economic workers and so on. So I'm afraid the die is cast. Aboriginal Canadians, multicultural Canada, this is our future. And I think, we'll see later what people think about it. Source countries now, interesting. Philippines is now number 1. China, India. I mean, these, of course, are, and the studies we do of the Chinese and Indian Canadians, they're just doing really well in our country. And I guess they're getting involved in politics as well. I do studies of, immigrant groups and coming here, becoming a citizen, get the kids in school, get a job, join a political party, get nominated, get elected. We should have 20% foreign-born in the parliament. We have about 12%. It's astounding. It's just absolutely astounding. That people can just think of, I just said that, but you just try to do what I just said. Right? And they're elected in ridings where their own people are usually a quarter, 10%, 15, 10% of the population. It's not just their own group take over a riding. They have to get support from everyone. Right? Anyway, that's another book. Here we are. Permanent residents in Canada. These are the big cities, of course. This is where people have come from, and you can see for a long time people were coming to Toronto. It's now dropped that the immigrants are now coming, it's dropped to about 32%. Montreal, it's up a little bit. Vancouver, it's about the same. What's happening is that, of course, economic opportunities in Canada are not just in Toronto and the GTA now. They're in Saskatchewan, which is booming. They're in Alberta. They're across the country. And I guess when we were surprised about this, and then Naheed Nenshi got elected in Calgary, and then we think, oh my God, Calgary, it used to be all white and now they're all Muslims. The guy gets elected as mayor. So we're much more multicultural. Edmonton and Calgary are much more interesting cities than the stereotype that they're all a bunch of cowboys. We're becoming much more multicultural. Winnipeg is a similar sort of thing. I went to Winnipeg. Okay, is there anybody here with a turban? Any Sikhs in the room? So I wrote my book, Unlikely Utopia. And I went to Winnipeg, I was invited there, and I got in a taxi and a guy with a turban. So I said, okay, I have got to be really sensitive, because I looked in my Wikipedia about how you pronounce the word S-I-K-A, Sikh, right? Sikh, and it said Sikh. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be, because everybody says Sikh. So I'm going to be really politically correct and say Sikh. So I said to the guy, how many Sikh people are in Winnipeg? And he said, nobody's sick. There was flu last year, but we're all fine. Okay, don't tell ethnic jokes about other groups. This is not a good thing to do. Anyway, I tell that to my Sikh friends, and they say, Michael, it's okay. We know you're trying to be funny, right? So it's like Russ Peters, right? When I grew up, we used humor, ethnic humor, to put other people down. You know how kids use humor now? To connect to other people, right? To be funny, to be ironic, to make the connection. I'll laugh at you, you laugh at me. We're all a joke. We're all a majority of minorities anyway. So let's try to get along. Use humor to connect, not to put down. It's a wonderful transformation in Canada. It's not always true, but it is a trend that I see in the country. And it's very funny. Young people, of course, are all ironic. Whatever they say, the opposite is true. They're always saying the opposite. So it makes it difficult when we do content analysis of the internet and people are saying the bloody opposite of what they're doing. So anyway, that's a whole problem for me in my survey research in the future, is figuring out what people are actually saying and is it ironic or not. Anyway, how do I do that from that slide? Okay, so here's another thing. Temporary workers, it will be an issue in the future. We've got, huge numbers, 300,000, nearly 300,000 foreign workers in our country. Do we just want them to go home, or are we going to provide them a pathway to become citizens in our country? Foreign students coming here, we love them. They pay triple what our kids do. Great. And then do we want them to go back home, or do we want them to stay here, or do we want them to do both? Whatever. There's going to be conversations in the future about those groups. But temporary workers becoming a more significant thing in Canada. Language. Well, English is staying about the same in terms of mother tongue. French staying about the same. Other now is almost up to the French number. Chinese, 1 million people have Chinese. Now, I think when I say Chinese, I probably need to be told by someone that there's Mandarin and Cantonese and other kinds of things, Italian, German, and so on. But this is an issue. Increasingly, it's becoming an issue in, let's say, public services. You have a hospital, people come. Do we have people who can? So you have to do studies of your catchment area and make sure that if you're in that business, that you've got somebody there. And there are cultural issues as well, right? That we need to go, we have reasonable accommodation here. People, women, men are going to come, and they're going to be not just language issues, but cultural issues. We have to be sensitive to those sorts of things as well. It's one of the implications of multiculturalism in our country. Visible minority, well, 16% now, and by 2031, it's going to be 31% visible minority. You all know, of course, that when we define visible minority, and I give oh my God, yes, at the footnote there is defining what visible minority is. It excludes Aboriginal Canadians. Interesting. They're not considered visible minority in the census definition. But you can see Chinese, South Asian, Black, Arab, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is actually in future is going to become a completely difficult thing, because you take a look at this guy or this woman and so on, and my dad was, Greek, and my mom was Iranian. But everybody says I look Spanish. So what we're getting is we got kids now in university, right? Are 13% of kids in university in Canada are now in mixed race unions. So it used to be, and we started out fearing the other. Then we thought we could tolerate the other, right? French and English and all the other. Now we savor the other. Meat and potatoes, ordering Chinese food or pizzas, and now we do fusion. So we're doing it with people. And in fact, if you marry inside your own race or religious or ethnic group, it shows a failure of imagination as a Canadian. When my kids bring somebody home to dinner, I want something really different, so it'll be interesting. And we can learn something. If we're going to be the microcosm of the planet, then, okay, let's benefit from it. It saves me a trip somewhere dangerous, so. Anyway, this is, that's riffing on visible minorities. Okay, what do we think? This chart is interesting, and it's backwards. The question, the phrase is, do you agree or disagree there's too much immigration in Canada? We could have said there's too little immigration, but we use that phrase. We started in 1977. 61% in 1977, there's too much immigration in Canada. And they said that all the way through until the late 90s, when somebody put something in the water, because Canadians started to change in the late 90s. There was some tipping point. I haven't done a book on this, but something happened in Canada where it just changed. And you'll see other charts here. Look at them. If you got a kid in university who wants to do a PhD, I'll give them the data. I'd like to know what happened and why. But we changed somehow. So look what happens at the turn of the millennium, and then you get people disagreeing that we have too much immigration in Canada from, about 2000 right till. We had a little blip a couple of years ago after that Great Recession, but now we're back up at 58%. What else do we think? Immigrants take away jobs from other Canadians. 74% disagree, and it seems to be flatlined again from the late 1990s. 24% agree. Too many immigrants are not adopting Canadian values. Now, I could take 15 minutes on this. Too many immigrants are not adopting Canadian values. This needs a lot of unpacking. Okay? What are Canadian values? What do people mean by Canadian values? I have a book on this. We've done a survey again on what it means to be a good Canadian citizen. The short form is this. Canadian values are treating everybody equally. When we say that, we mean gender equality. We evolved over the last 50 years from religious patriarchy to equality. We want our young women to do as well as our young men. In fact, we're now hoping our young men will catch up to the young women. It's happened pretty quickly. Gender equality, religion, patriarchy. And it's very interesting that the issue on this is the issue of how women dress. Interesting. So I'm a guy, again, not everything's a joke, but I'm a guy who kind of worries about his daughter wearing too few clothes, right? I mean, the way women walk around, But there is a concern among some cultures about, too many clothes, like hijabs, niqabs, burqas, and all of this. Quebec is particularly concerned about this. In the mid-50s, right, the one daughter went into the convent and went around looking like a penguin. And it looked like this is what people were telling them to do. And we care very much that women do what they want to do and aren't doing it because some guy is telling them to do it. And I think a lot has to do with the whole question of gender equality, of women and men being equal, and our determination. And I think that the symbolism of issues that we're seeing, which we're seeing, and we sometimes use that term honor killing and so on, has got us all scared. Now we need to settle down. I'm going to do another survey of Muslim Canadians. We're going to find out about women and what they're wearing and what they want to wear. It's interesting that in Turkey, when Ataturk took over, he dictated that it would be a secular culture and women wouldn't wear a hijab anymore. Now, as Turkey is thinking of joining the European Union, they're being told that you can't tell women what to wear. So the liberal policy is one in which women are allowed to wear traditional headdress. Again, your brain kind of gets twisted around there, but women are allowed to do this. And of course, when I went to Mass, my mom and I and the family went to Mass in the 50s, Mom put on a little headscarf and men took their hats off. So what is reasonable accommodation? What is religious patriarchy? I think this is part of what's going on here. And again, we always go halfway. When men wore turbans, we said fine. As long as they don't make all the Mounties wear turbans, it's okay. So what do the Canadians do? Again, it's kind of a reasonable accommodation, and you're going to find it in the workplace and elsewhere. What's halfway? What is reasonable? Let me tell you, we have a criminal code. We have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We have stop signs. We have laws. And then the question is, what after that is reasonable accommodation? There's a riff on there's another blog riff on this particular chart. What values are most important for immigrants to adopt? This is October. We did this for the Trudeau Foundation. So the average Canadian, this is a representative sample of people 18 and over, respect for Canada's history and culture, speak English or French. Obviously, that's helpful in the workplace and elsewhere. Be tolerant of others, respect the law, need to assimilate, respect for other religions, gender equality, top of mind, but it's part of Canada's history and culture. And this is what a representative sample has said. And then you compare what immigrants, if you ask them, what do you think is important for immigrants to adopt? What are the most important for immigrants to adopt when they come to the country? And then you compare that to the native-born. Respect for Canada's history and culture, no difference. Immigrants and the people here agree. That's number one. Speaking the language, either the official languages, French or English, that's right up there. Again, a consensus. Tolerate other people. Immigrants, they tell you, we came to Canada because we were in our country, there wasn't tolerance for people like me. There wasn't religious freedom. Of course that's what you offer in Canada. Respect the law. Well, peace, order, and good government. Great. And respect for other religions. And need to assimilate. This is pretty startling that, in fact, what immigrants think is you have to do when you come to Canada, and what we think they have to do is a consensus. That's pretty good. An increasing proportion think that it's not. Now, here's again, I was telling you earlier about, the problem of women and clothing and all this sort of thing. So is it a good idea or a bad idea? And I guess we did this in 2006 and in 2010, that we ban Muslims from wearing headscarves in public. Now, this is something debated in Europe. I think the French are going to do it. I don't know, some other countries, maybe Holland, Belgium, I'm not sure. And it's gone from 36 up to 45, an increasing number who think that is the case. But bad idea is still the majority opinion, that you actually ban it. Okay, we're saying, okay, let people decide. But it's clearly a debate in Canada. And the headscarf, again, the hijab, the niqab, it's like, we first met, Inuit, and we had to figure out 50 names of snow. Now, of course, with immigrants, we got to figure out 50 names for headdress and all this other stuff. It just means that Canadians are going to be the smartest people on the planet because we have to have 100 names for everything that's out there. But that's great. So then in Quebec, good idea is the majority opinion, 64%. So Quebec, again, looks more like France. Again, Quebec in the 50s questioned en masse what they considered religious patriarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. And so they look more like France in the sense it's a secular country, and you've got to look like it's a secular country. English Canada, You could partly say this. When you have immigration, insecure majorities can be a problem for minorities, because they become insecure because the majority is insecure. I hope this isn't too offensive, but if you're a French Quebecer, you're a bit insecure because you have a culture that's lasted 3 centuries, a language minority, trying to protect yourselves in a sea of English, and you're concerned about losing your language and culture. And I think that is probably more of a factor in Quebec than in English Canada, which has quickly kind of become a multiculture, right? So you don't have that sense among the English or the Irish in English Canada that we have to protect our culture. It's already assumed that we're part of a multiculture. So it's a different conversation in Quebec. It is a conversation within Canada. We still have the criminal code. We have the charter. They have their charter and so on. But there's more of a conversation in Quebec. So that's my, what have I done? Multicultural, a little bit of French, English, multicultural. Aboriginal people, and as was mentioned, we did a big study. Look at the growing population of Aboriginal people. And look at the headline here. Now, this is ancestry. So this is there any Aboriginal blood in your veins? Now, at one time, asking that question, people would have said no, even if there were. Now, people are proud of it. So part of the answer to this, part of the increase, is that we've gone from people being embarrassed about their background to being proud of it. So Peter Lougheed, former Premier of Alberta, does not have Aboriginal identity. So he wouldn't say I'm an Indian or I'm a First Nation or any of those terms, Indigenous and so on. But way back, there is Aboriginal blood, and he is proud to say that is in my history. And so he has Aboriginal identity. So that's nearly 2 million people. And that's nearly the numbers that were estimated that were here when Europeans arrived, which is interesting. What happened to those people and how long it's taken for just the population to get back to where it was when they met these Europeans centuries ago. 1.2 million people have Aboriginal identity. So that means I am an Aboriginal person. I'm a First Nations, or I'm an Ojibwe, or I'm a Cree, or whatever, a Mohawk, etc., whatever you would say. How am I doing on? I'm going to have to fly. All right. So, and then of course, I'm Métis, and there's of course that there's a census definition of Métis, which is mixed blood, and then there is the Métis Nation, who trace it back to the descendants of the people who were in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and we know from our history books. So it's a very interesting thing, and you can sit down with a Métis friend or person and talk about it. You'll learn things. I certainly learned it when I did this study. So there you see North American Indian. We still use that word Indian. And although I think we've taken it out of the department, it's now Aboriginal Affairs, but it was the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs for a long time. Nearly 700,000 people. Métis, nearly 400,000 people. Inuit, 50,000, of whom about 10,000 live south of 60. And when we did our study, we found we did a big number of interviews here in the Ottawa area, and then multiple responses. Urban, 54%. Interesting. And that's what got me thinking about doing a study of urban Aboriginal people. And there's some results here. Okay, this is sort of a chart that you might want to look at later, but this is the proportion of the CMA that's Aboriginal, 1%, Halifax. Look at Winnipeg, 10% of the population is Aboriginal, and Winnipeg, Regina, nearly 10, and Saskatoon. Those are very interesting cities which have a really significant proportion of the population. Prince Albert is a third. I want to do a study in Prince Albert, but I need funding, of course, for that, and a partnership to do that study. And you can also see the numbers here. 68,000 Aboriginal people in Winnipeg. It's probably the largest urban population of Aboriginal people in the history of Canada. Because when we were here, they didn't have cities that large. Now, down in Central America, of course, they did. And when you go down there and you visit Central America and see the Mayans and the Aztecs and so on. So this is very interesting because it leads me and other Aboriginal people to think, what do you do when you get a city? Well, cities are where a kind of civilization develops and so on, where you get knowledge and culture and all of that sort of thing. So to me, the future, and I've talked to John Lawson, Saul, and others about this, very exciting when you get Aboriginal culture confronting multiculture of the cities and then using technologies that we've developed and so on. There's some very interesting, wonderful Imaginative is an Aboriginal film festival in Toronto. Films have been going for 20 years. It's a center in all of the world where there are Aboriginal people, creative with filmmaking, that we can celebrate here. This is all, most of us don't know it, but it is, we're going to see more of this stuff in the first half of this century. This is population growth, Aboriginal versus overall. Look at Montreal. Whew, Halifax, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, Thunder Bay. Fantastic growth of population, and they're young people. And they are young people in cities. In cities, you don't do hunting, fishing, and trapping. In cities, you do knowledge work, right? We have young people, Aboriginal people in our cities that have got to be involved in the work, in the kinds of jobs that you have in cities. Again, this is probably something that maybe the First Nations talking to the Prime Minister about, although I don't know who there was actually representing urban Aboriginal people. I guess the AFN would say they do. This would be a question to see how that all resolves. But quite clearly, half the population in urban, we know what jobs are in urban areas. The population is growing. They're young people. It's obvious what we ought to be doing. It's obvious, but then you got to do it, right? Education. This is, of course, look at this. Less than high school, Aboriginal people, 32% versus 10% of the overall population. University, 11% versus 34%. And what we hope is the 11% of Aboriginal people with university education is a tipping point. And that out of that group come the leaders who can be icons for the others. Like Obama did for black people, is that, okay, that guy did it. Somebody like me can do that, so I can do it. And actually, Obama, interestingly, even in our research of urban Aboriginal people, is a bit of an icon. Because look at that, a black guy in the States became president. So icons and leadership is extremely important. And when we do studies, again, Maitrey, and we do this in Toronto, but I know it's happening elsewhere, to try to advance visible minorities and Aboriginal people in leadership positions, what you're doing, the power of that, for those kids in elementary and secondary school is astounding, because they say, if that person can do it, I can do it. And it really has a huge influence on people. We ask young women, what does it take to get you successful in post-secondary? Because we surveyed kids that got scholarships from the National Aboriginal Achievement Foundation. Women told us it takes a village. Because a lot of the women, young women, have kids. Now, my daughter, Marion, at Queen's, she doesn't have any friends that have kids going to Queen's, but Aboriginal women do. And they have a kid. Just think of the help they need. Also, when something goes bad back in the reserve, somebody gets sick, you got to go back and help. That's in your culture. I'm not judging it. I actually think that's kind of nice, right? that somebody would go back and help. But it interferes with your studies. So women tell us it takes a village. I need a lot of help to get through. And what happens often, that girl has a kid when she's in maybe grade 12. And they say, okay, we're going to help you raise the kid. You're a smart girl. You stick with school and we'll support you. You go to college or university. You become a nurse or a doctor or maybe a lawyer or whatever you can do, and they help her. With the guys, they don't give you that answer. They say, a mentor. I met somebody who told me I wasn't an idiot. And I believe them. It is an astounding thing. And again, I'm making gender differences, but the research told us that, and it kind of makes sense, right? And a lot of it with the guys is that, again, they feel like they're real screw-ups. And I'm stupid. And you feel bad about yourself. And then suddenly they do something, and another guy or a woman says, you know something, Will, you're a smart guy. You should stick with that. Put in those 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell says, and you can succeed. Anyway, this is all something that came out of the Urban Aboriginal study. It was so wonderful. And again, we want to work with Aboriginal people to kind of leverage this stuff. Education, employment. You've got to have a job. We all work. Clarence Louie out there in Osoyoos, they've got a thing saying, Indians have always worked. When you people arrived here, we weren't waiting for a check from Ottawa. Okay? We were working. And anyway, there's a whole dialogue and discussion. And I often wondered, the Canadians I know who are liberal, tolerant, and trying to help the world, they go to Mozambique before they would actually know how to talk to an Aboriginal person. And it's interesting. It's a block. It's guilt, I guess. If you talk to Dr. Freud or something, it's guilt, or we don't know what to say. We don't even know what to call people. Language is important. Are you an Indian? Are you a native? First, ask. Okay, what tribe, what group do you come, what community do you come from? Just to break the ice, and then empathy takes over, and then, we take it from there. Anyway, what else am I saying? What do they want? What's a successful life, we asked urban Aboriginal people. I want to complete, they're younger population, so the first thing, complete my college or university. I want to raise a family. I want to have a good job. I want to own a home. I want to be financially independent. I'm talking here about urban Aboriginal people, not the cross-section of the population. Who would have said the same thing, right? And then the one I like the best, travel and vacation. Is in your stereotype an Aboriginal person who wants to go to Paris, who wants to go to the Far East. And I think it's kind of oh my God, yeah. And young Ginger, who helped us do our study, she's a Nishka from up the coast on the west coast who helped us do our study, and she loves doing. When she takes vacation, they go around the world. It is not part of our mentality. And what it is empathy. We're humans, and there are differences and there are similarities, and you got to figure them out, and you got to treat everybody with respect. And I think it's really a long life and happiness, good life, and so on. See your children and grandchildren succeed. Here are somewhat important. What is a successful life? Raising, again, it's be close to friends, raising healthy, well-adjusted children, living a balanced life, having a good, successful career, financial independence, strong connections to the Aboriginal identity. There's a whole thing about this. Residential schools, thinking that we would help people succeed by taking their identity and their culture from them. It was not a very humanitarian idea, and it was really bad sociology. Because if you don't know who you are, you cannot succeed. You must know who you are to then build upon that platform. Now, the basic needs that Maslow talked about were food, clothing, and shelter. And that's because he took for granted that we all knew who we were. But in our research and in other stuff I've seen, you need food, clothing, and shelter, and you need identity. You have to know who you are, and you have to feel proud of who you are. And if you don't have that, you have no platform to then do well in school and do well in the world of employment. So we need a massive job of putting the Indian back in the Indian and teaching young people. You know where young Aboriginal people learn about their culture? Prison. That's when a lot of people learn. Or when they get to college or university. Do they get it in primary or secondary school? No. Do we know that this has to happen? Yes. Saskatchewan is leading the way on this. So we have to help people learn about themselves, find that identity as a platform for further growth. And knowing about yourself, connection to your traditional community is very important. Where is home for urban Aboriginal? 71%. The myth that they're passing through is a myth. This is their home. First generation say, this is my home, 66%. Second generation, 87% of people say the city is my home. Okay? Now, there's a connection to back home, just like an immigrant would have a connection to back home. What do we ask immigrants they want to do? I want to get successful in Canada, and then I want to go back home and help them out. I'm a doctor, so I'll go back every couple of weeks. $25 billion a year is sent by Canadians back home somewhere else. NGO support and remittances to family. What is Canada's official aid? $4 billion a year. 25 billion, 4 billion. Who is Canada's foreign policy? We are. Right? And when we decry that government isn't doing that and isn't doing this, stop crying. Individuals, community groups, foundations can be as much of an expression of Canadian idealism and pragmatic business connections as our government. Now, we do have a government, in fact, would be very happy if a lot of the rest of Canada would step to the table. And rather than decrying it and waiting for the government to do something, let me tell you guys, life's too short, right? You can complain about the government, join a political party, run as a candidate. In the meantime, there's stuff you can do here in Canada and abroad. What else have we got here? Canadians are more likely than not to believe Aboriginal peoples are the victims rather than the causes of our problems. It's a long kind of a question, but basically in 2010, it's colonialism. All right, we took the country from them, and policy since then, whether it was again putting people on reserves, they didn't choose often a lot where they were put by the Crown or whoever the authorities, and and then government policies and things like residential schools and so on, or is it brought on by themselves? Well, the majority of Canadians think, look, this is the legacy of colonialism that is the major problem here. This is us. This is the Canadians and my segmentation of our orientation to Canada's Aboriginal people. 24% of us are dismissive naysayers. Look, it was tough for me, it's tough for them, it's tough for everybody. Pull up your socks and get to work. So that's that gang, if I am characterizing them right. Inattentive skeptics, 14%. Uninformed, unaware, I just don't care. Cultural romantics, my favorite group. These are my neighbors in the Annex in Toronto. These people are idealistic and optimistic. They think the Aboriginal people have great culture. We love to see them at the Olympics. We love to go down to the art gallery and see the great paintings they can do and all the cultural stuff. Aren't they wonderful? And it's sort of an idealized noble savage, and these people have a special connection to the spirit world and all of this sort of thing. It is, as I say to the Aboriginal people, I know you think this is pretty disgusting and pretty condescending. It is positive. And then we should ramp up from there. And then and then there's these guys, 17%, nearly 1 in 5 of us, connect enthusiasts. We have friends and colleagues who are Aboriginal people. And just like we have friends and colleagues who are Muslims or people from anywhere in the world, we've met them. They're humans. They love their family. They work hard. They're motivated by all the things that we are. High level of contact, strong belief that Aboriginal people often experience also an awareness of the history and the history of colonialism and so on. And they say, rather than be blocked, let's do something. And of course, I think, again, there's tipping points on various things. I think there's a tipping point on this. French, English. Of course, my joke about French and English is, at least Quebec, she's standing at the door with her bags packed, but won't leave. And he's sitting on the couch watching the Leafs lose. So this is a very good Canadian marriage. So we got that all taken care of, right? And then multiculturalism is like everybody coming and the immigrants doing better than the people who have been here for a long time. So that story is a good story. Again, these are caricatures. And then Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal. And I think this is the one that's just beginning. And it's in the Canadian heart. They want it to happen. You know, the people who are the most open to Aboriginal people are the immigrants. When we studied the immigrants, they felt a greater connection because, these people, they're interesting, they're part of Canada, and they're like us. They're coming to the city. So we have said to Vancouver, why don't you connect the two groups? And of course, if you really want to go way back, Aboriginal people and people from China and the Far East, there actually is. I have friends who go over there, Aboriginal leaders, who say, cousin, right? Let's do business with the Chinese. So, imagination can lead you a long way. Again, if it's well meant. This is a chart that just puts together Aboriginal population and visible minority population in various cities. I'm not going to talk about it. It takes too long. How am I doing here? I've got 5 minutes to tell you about staying alive. So this is for baby boomers. We have a few more. Actually, as I say, the second half of our adult life. My friends say for me, it may be the first half of my adult life. At least my brain. So let's quickly look at, we got 5 million elders, 9 million boomers. Sorry about this, elders. I told my mom that. She says, of course, Michael, you would call us elders, wouldn't you? And you're boomers, and you'll always be boomers. You'll never be elders. And then the ones next, the Gen X and the Gen Y. So I'm kind of focusing then on these baby boomers, 45 to 63, but I wrote that 2 years ago, so it's 47 and 65 now. And here we are, the pig and the python. I used pig. I shouldn't maybe use that term. Anyway, but the baby boomers moving through, and you saw my chart earlier that as that boom moves through, then it's our future of our next 10 to 15, 20 years. So, you can imagine the impact on all sorts of places as baby boomers, leave the workplace and so on. So we got the boomers, evolving values. I say deferred gratification for the elders. Of course, that was because, my granny, sweet granny who died a few years ago, a woman who lived a life of duty and self-sacrifice for her husband, for her parents, and for her children. And, when we buried her, we called her a saint. Of course, her daughter and baby boomer daughters decided that somebody else could be a saint. I want to have a little fun on the way through. Of course, we buried Granny, and we called her, a saint, and again, deferred gratification. She was a Catholic woman, and she deferred gratification to the next life, right? Well, most of us Canadians now are not waiting for the next life, and we're not even sure what's going to happen there. So you got a kind of a deferred, and these were people who deferred gratification to the weekend, to the one vacation they had a year, to retirement, etc. Boomers said, forget it. Whatever our parents did, we're going to do the opposite. We're having fun during the day, right? If you want to have a coffee break, you don't wait for the coffee break. You leave and you go to Starbucks or Tim's and you get yourself a coffee. We want to have a meeting. You don't meet at the office. You go off somewhere and have fun. We believe, remember knowledge through suffering? We believe you don't suffer. You don't learn when you're suffering. We think you learn when you're happy, right? And when you kind of laugh at a joke, you're saying, aha, I believe what that person has said. So we have spare the rod and spoil the child. People believe this. Spare the rod, spoil the child. If you hit a kid, it's a failure of imagination. Well, not only illegal, but it shows how bloody stupid you are, right? And now a lot of the old saws, the wisdom of the elders, some things were wise, some things were not very wise, and that's why we have social change. Now, I'm speaking as a boomer who thinks some of the things we did were okay, right? And some of the things that we inherited from the past weren't good. So I think we honor our elders, but we also question, right? And I think you have to have a balance on that. Anyway, that's a boomer speaking. Boomers and then post-boomers. So immediate gratification, then instant gratification for the post-boomers. My map, forget it. Tradition on the top, ideals and individualism on the bottom. Outer directed, inner directed. You got that? That's like a 1-year course in sociology. Who's in the upper left-hand quadrant? Well, you're conformist to traditional values. You're outer directed. So your icon is Martha. And you believe in social success, materialism, and pride. It's all about materialism. We come here, we get stuff. Stuff is symbolic of where we are in the status hierarchy. In my day, it would have been start with a Ford or a Chevy, move up to a Buick or an Olds, and retire on Collins Avenue with a pink Cadillac, right? So everything you buy is a symbol of where you are in the status. Just like in the Army, you get more stripes and stars. Okay, so this is the materialistic status hierarchy. Over here, you got traditional values, but you're inner directed. Security, stability. Everything in the past was better than it was now. We played hockey better in the past. Rock'em sock'em, that was the way it was. None of this wimp helmets, right? So our philosopher king of this quadrant is our boy John Cherry, who will be our next Governor General. In the inner directed but more idealistic, individualistic, we have David down here, who loves animals more than people, but that's fine. He's entitled to love the earth. And other species. Anyway, but he believes in autonomy and personal well-being, and this is sort of the baby boomer headquarters. And then over here in the lower left, experience and personal development. And these are people who go beyond the boomers, personal fulfillment, personal development, connecting to other people who aren't like yourself. And so those are sort of the major mental postures of the Canadians. Now that, you've just heard 5 books in 1 minute. Early boomers have been at the vanguard of changing values every stage of their life. And, of course, some of the stereotypes, they're self-centered, they're spendthrifts, they're nostalgic, they're tree huggers, they're indulgent parents, they're left-leaning hippies, they're sellouts, they're in denial about death and so on. And it's all true. But they're not all the same. I have a great assistant, I'll tell you that, Lisa. Okay, so forget the stereotypes, right? They're diverse. So in that left quadrant, the people who are like Martha and all that stuff, these are anxious communitarians. The guys up on the upper right, I said guys, are disengaged Darwinists. Autonomous rebels, right, down in the lower right quadrant. I had fun talking about them, and then the connected enthusiasts. And in my first book, Sex and the Snow, I introduced Canadians, or you could say I inflicted these tribes on Canadians. And then in the Staying Alive book, I look at them like 10 and 20 years later, what's happened to them, what's happened to the autonomous rebels, the disengaged Darwinists, and so on. And these are the proportions. Interesting, 48% disengaged Darwinists. We have a conservative government. And autonomous rebels are 19%, connected enthusiasts are 21%, and anxious communitarians are 12%. And if you look at the anxious communitarians, okay, so you can sort of think that the guy is a disengaged Darwinist, the wife is over an anxious communitarian, concern for appearance, status recognition, fear of violence, and a flexible personality. Like I've got to be this way to the kids, this way to my mother, this way to his parents, this way to mine, and all that. And the values that are weak are hyper-rationality, sexual permissiveness, although I do have a little asterisk beside that one, as you'll see. Rejection of authority, she wants authority, and flexible gender identity, no way. Men are men, women are women, I'd like them to stay distinct like that. And then we ask these people, again, looking ahead in terms of staying alive, what is your bucket list? Like, what is your dream that you want to do before you depart this planet? I want to see the Rockies. I want to see California and the Grand Canyon. Essentially all those things that are on the placemat. You know, all those little... here's a sweet one. I want to see my son happy with his own sons. You know, not everything is bad. Like, this is so sweet, right? Some of these are good. I want to visit all my relatives at least once more. Now, I have a cousin out near Woodstock who has done this. It says, okay, she's going to get one of the relatives, and we're going to visit everybody in southern Ontario we're related to before we die. Just get the family car and leave. Leave the husband behind. He can watch the football game. We're going to visit all our relatives. So I can relate to that one. See the Leafs win the Stanley Cup. Okay, so we may have to live forever. And sleep with George Clooney. Now, this woman says she does not believe in fooling around and sexual permissiveness, but anyway, so girls just want to have fun, right? With George Clooney. Disengaged Darwinists. So these guys, strongest fatalism. Okay, so here's a guy. You sit down at dinner and you say, you know, Dad, you should have lettuce, greens, you know, vegetables. And he's saying, look, I'm going to go when I'm going to go. I'm having the steak. And forget about that stuff. So it's kind of you're going to go when you're going to go. Hyper-rationality, risk aversion, and ethnic intolerance. Not so happy with the way Canada's changed over the last 50 years, right? He thinks they've come here to make us them rather than them become us. But I can get all into that thinking. What are they? Introspection and empathy. So why would I look at my inner child? Are you crazy? Empathy with what it's like to be somebody else. Are you nuts? The guy's in my way. I'm going through him. Empathy. Cultural fusion. Forget it. I want meat and potatoes, and I want it delivered, you know, at 5 o'clock like it always has been. Rejection of authority, weak on that. I want a strong figure. What does Canada need? We need a Churchill. We need a new FDR. We need a strong leader to fight evil. And whatever it is, whether it's in sports or in foreign policy. And novelty, are you crazy? I don't want anything new. It's confusing and frustrating. So what's their bucket list? Keep being a good dad. So isn't that nice? Restore an antique car. This is what he looks forward to. I think that's a great thing. Build my kids a house or cottage. Now, I am a real wimp urban guy. My dad was a general contractor, and he wanted me to go to university, so he taught me none of the skills of fixing toilets, hitting nails or anything like this. But there still are real men in this country. And there are men who actually, I guess this is a guy, who's actually dreams he's going to build a cottage for his kids. And he'll do it. He may even do the electrical and the plumbing and all of that. I tell my son, Dad, there were people like this. We go into Home Hardware. I said, this is what men do. Just to make sure that he doesn't call a lawyer someday saying, I had 2 mothers. I mean, anyway, there are guys that are going to do this, and God bless them. And I hope someday when the kids get the cottage that they invite them for a nice barbecue dinner or 2. Reconcile with my ex, I think, that's a sweet one. And finally, be able to enjoy life at a slower pace. So that's our distinct. Now we have the autonomous rebels. These are, again, the leading edge boomers. Reject authority. They have it on the bumper sticker on the car. Question authority, reject authority. Gender equality, that's central to the way they think. Treat young people as adults. Now, not in everything, but, you treat your son as an adult when you have to fix the computer. Who the hell else is going to fix it but the youngest man who's in the space? You treat your daughter equally. Young people are treated as equals as soon as you possibly can, and you respect them as equals. And you pursue your happiness to the detriment of duty. Now, the way this is working is this. You do your duty as long as it makes you feel good. If it makes you feel awful, you don't. So that's the way I think. So the boomers who are visiting mom or dad and they're nursing, it's like, Okay, if mom is nice, yeah, let's go and visit. But if mom is horrible, I might not go as often as I should. So we do say I don't want to feel total pain when I'm doing my duty. If I feel good about it, then I'm really happy to do my duty. I think that's the way they're starting to rationalize that. They're weak on fear of violence, joy of consumption there, and post-consumption, they want to travel and see the world. Status recognition, they just want to be treated equally. National superiority, they're not big on that, except, of course, when the Canadians are playing the Americans in hockey. And then they want to see our national superiority reasserted again about every 4 years at the Olympics. So their bucket list are go to Machu Picchu, so it's a more expansive thing. They want to go in the headwaters of the Amazon, the safari, somewhere, China or Brazil. Another modest man or woman is going to write a novel. Another one's going to offer themselves to the Counseling Foundation or Environics Institute, I guess, a think tank. That's fine. I'm sure we could use your thinking. And drop acid safely. We do interviewing in the Gulf Islands off Vancouver, I guess. I love this one. Finish my film on Ukrainian socialists in Canada. Anybody from Winnipeg? And conquer the gross grind in 60 minutes. Now, anybody in Vancouver, this is something. It's on. You're going over the bridge and up. There's an easy way and there's a hard way. I'd take the easy way. But anyway, that's what this guy wants to do, or woman for that matter. Connected enthusiasts, so lower left-hand, they're big on creativity. They're big on cultural fusion. They like putting all the cultures together. Social learning, you learn from diverse others, right? And ethnic. This should be ethical consumerism. But I guess in Canada, in our multicultural Canada, ethical consumerism is also ethnic consumerism. Anyway, that's a typo, and I'll fix it. Weakest values, ethnic intolerance. Okay, they're not intolerant. They don't accept violence as a way of doing things. They're not anomic. They are connected to the culture. They're not aimless. They have goals in their life. And they're not fatalistic. They think they're in charge of their lives. Okay? And what do they want to do? Learn a first language. Okay, these people aren't just going to Mexico. They're going to learn Spanish. Okay. And they think, oh, that'll keep my brain going forever. End poverty in Canada. They're modest people who I guess are going to help the NDP do this. Help a young person succeed. So, again, mentoring someone, connecting to a young person in their family or not. Visit the 2 children I sponsor. Is this getting a portrait of this kind of person? And if you're in Quebec, of course, you want to be a clown and, Cirque du Soleil or something like that. So, work and retirement. The big thing here is this. Work until you're 65. Work until I'm not useful. Okay, when elders were going to retire, and I'm going to end very soon, when elders were going to retire, 65, they had about another 10 years. They often had jobs in manufacturing or bureaucratic office jobs where there were bosses and a hierarchy and so on. They thought they deserved a rest. And they had 10 more years to go. I mean, so what is that? That's, again, whether it's a trailer park in Florida or maybe a gated community in Tucson or something. You earned a rest. You had 10 years to go. I'm going to go golfing with the guys, or we're going to have some fun and so on. But the boomers have 20 years to go. Okay. 20 years is a lot of time to spend exchanging cliches with the guys at the golf club. Like it might drive me crazy. Or going down to Florida and, playing around a 4 with a dyspeptic Republican. Isn't that hell? We got 20 years to go. And the ones who are better educated, as it goes up with socioeconomic status, have 30 years to go. Okay, you're 65, you're going to live to 95. Kids born today in Canada, young men are going to live till 100 and young women are going to live to 103. Does that sound like hell or heaven? Well, and so if that means if they don't leave home until they're 30 or 35, haven't they figured something out? A third at home, a third maybe doing some work or pretending to, and then a third goofing off and, whatever. Or at least, so what they're thinking is this. I'm going to work till I'm useful. I'll go back. If they are doing high-level intellectual jobs, they might go back to the workplace if the workplace has something for them to do. Do they want to go to work at 7:30 on Monday morning and end at, at 5:30 on Friday afternoon? No way. They're going to go when it's not rush hour. They're going to go on their terms, and they're going to take a good long bloody vacation with their spouse and see Machu Picchu or something like that. But if you want them, make it fun. Don't patronize them. They're there to mentor and help, and a lot of them want to do that. Okay? So that's they linked their work. Work was, if they liked their work with elders, it was a bonus. With the boomers, of course, they think it's fulfillment. They don't want to talk to their kids about what they do, that they're destroying the environment. They want to brag about the stuff they're doing at work. So it's a different mentality. 25% of elders thought they might work. Some, after they retired, it's 50% of the baby boomers. And again, a lot of them think if I don't work, I'll drop dead. So they actually think that if they're stimulated, it's good, but I need balance, right? And I don't need stress. I've had enough stress. So that's the way a lot of them are thinking. Look, anxious communitarians, least likely to do paid work in retirement. The disengaged Darwinist, he really wants to coach Little League hockey or do something like that in the community. The autonomous rebel probably goes back to where they were working and keep engaged as long as they find it interesting and they can help people. Connected enthusiasts, interesting. You got a lot of these people, baby boomer women in their 50s. The guys seem to be a bit tired and want a break. The women are saying, I married the guy, I got a couple of kids, they're launched, it's my turn. And the strongest entrepreneurial spirit in the baby boomer generation are women in their 50s. I don't know where they sell testosterone or something, but these gals have got it, and they want to connect to other people like themselves. It may be other women, it could be some guys, and they want to start a business, but they have a lot of energy, and remember, they devoted a lot of energy to that family and to the kids and so on, and so there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit. With the guys, it's a little more laid back and so on. So I found this a wonderful thing that we found in our study. Oh my God, quickly. Just on values, same-sex marriage, look at it, 2010. 43% strongly agree, 25% somewhat agree. You saw the government flip-flop 2 weeks ago in about 24 hours. I guess they must have downloaded this chart. 3/4 believe every woman who wants an abortion should be able to have one. It's now 75% who agree versus 22%. So this is some social values change. Oh, and then there's this. Father of the family, my one question, must be the master in his own house. So we measured this. This is a politically incorrect statement, of course, about patriarchy. Father must be the master in his house. You may have heard it, said. It's probably been said for hundreds of years. In 83, it was 42%. And then in 84, went down to 40. All the way down to 17% in 1998. And then it's been a bit flat. The reason it's flat, of course, is foreign-born are more likely. They come from more religious patriarchal cultures, so that's kind of flattened out the numbers. It went up in 1992 from 25 to 26. Of course, that was Kim Campbell was our prime minister, so she gave a shot in the arm to patriarchy. I told this to Kim, and I still have the bruise on my leg. Thank you very much, Michael. You can right. So it's a decline, and of course this again is an indicator of social change. Is that patriarchy is on the decline, and egalitarian is a very strong. We're now down at 20%. United States, it's 50%, and it's been increasing over the last 20 years. I have a book about this called Fire and Ice, and top rising trends in Canada, rejection of authority, community involvement, new social responsibility. Don't wait for the government, you do it. Legacy, I care what I leave behind. It's not about me in the afterlife. It's the memory of me in this life, my children, my family, and what I can do in my community. These are very strong values for people like you. Social learning, learning from diverse others. I'm going to be a discriminating consumer. I'm just not going to buy whatever's on sale. I have a sense of personal vitality. I look inside. I empathize with other people. I make an effort to keep myself healthy. And I also believe that we need a government as a partner, and that's why we've got Medicare and all the other programs. And what are the declining trends? Joy of consumption. We're moving to post-materialism. Stuff is not who I am. It's the experiences I have and connections to other people. Advertising, not so sure. If it was any good, my son or my daughter would tell me it's good, not some ad on the Super Bowl. Enemy and aimlessness, no, I know what life is about. Big business, yes, sometimes they serve the public interest, sometimes they don't. Intensity and emotional experiences, it's not all about that. It's about personal growth and well-being. Acceptance of violence, no. Violence is not how we do things. Violence is a failure of imagination, and we're going to try to get rid of it in our culture. Happiness to the detriment of duty. Again, do your duty and love it. Don't be fearful of violence. Importance of physical beauty. I don't know. This is, I guess, a superficial thing that's associated with advertising. And ethnic intolerance in decline. We become tolerant of the other because everybody is the other. So, I think I'm ending. What you need. Leading edge employers must have, and I'm talking about all sectors, government, NGOs, and private. And an employee base that reflects Canadian demographics. I gave you an overview of those. New Canadians, they've got to be part of it. Visible minorities have got to be part of it. Aboriginal peoples must be part of it, and in particular young Aboriginal people. Young people, they've got to be part of the future. And don't forget the baby boomers, they can be helpful. Canadian values, heterarchy. It's not hierarchy. Heterarchy says everybody in the organization should lead. There's time to lead and time to follow. But not one group of people who always lead and one group who always follow. So you lead on this, you follow on that. And organizations that can do this, and people with high titles who serve on committees, where somebody with a lower title is leading the project, is going to be a successful company. You keep your title, you get your perks and so on, but people are allowed to lead. And again, we know when it comes to technology, we know the youngest person in the room is going to lead because they know how to fix the thing. So heterarchy is the future, not hierarchy. New social responsibility, don't wait for the government to solve all our problems. The parties used to be the only vehicles for our idealism as Canadians. We have to get beyond that now, okay? They are a vehicle for idealism, but we go beyond it. And that's why young people are less engaged and more likely to want to join an NGO than join a political party. Gender equality is the core of Canadian values. Whew, I'm done. Thank you.